I'm Michelle Schumann. I'm the Artistic Director of the Austin Chamber Music Center. I'm here with Maureen Cross, and we are here to do Chamber Chat with Michelle and Mo and tell you about our upcoming concert.
Hi everyone. Well, as you know, last time when we met, we talked about Love Triangle, and that had the Schumann Brahms Love Triangle. And this concert, the Sublime Movement concert, also has a Brahms piece on it. And I was wondering, what the possible connection was there.
Well, for one thing, I just love Brahms, and I know almost all of you out there who love chamber music, you all love Brahms. I shouldn't say that you all love Brahms, but if you love chamber music, chances are you have a real penchant for the music of Johannes Brahms, because his music is so important in the chamber music literature. And as we've been going in the season, we've been kind of looking at these different relationships. And in the last concert with Love Triangle, the relationships between Clara and Robert Schumann and Johannes Brahms, and I'm carrying that a little bit into this concert as well, because we're talking not only about the relationships that people had amongst each other and how it influenced their music, but also the relationships that people had to anything that is outside of their musical being that influences their music. So I kind of carry on with the idea, taking a little bit from every concert and adding it to the next concert. The first concert really showed the impact that Beethoven had on many composers, and then we see how that exudes into the Schumanns and Brahms, and now we're carrying Brahms into this concert as well.
And that actually brings me to my next question. That's which probably a lot of people may or may not know, or may not notice, that you have kind of this narrative thread that runs throughout a season. Hence the overall title of the season is Under the Influence. And you had this first concert that had Beethoven's Brahms, and then that kind of flowed over into the next one, and then this one's kind of flowing into the next one. So when you're putting this whole season together, are you really conscious of this thread, this narrative that you want to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I have a consciousness when I'm putting together seasons, because I think it's always wonderful. There's so much great literature, and I love putting it together under a narrative to tell a story, so that not only do you remember the music that you get to hear, but you also have something to kind of hold on to with the information that's being told. And I think it helps us keep that music together and understand it and experience it in a way that is more special as well. And in this case, by going further on, presenting a work by Brahms, the great quartet, a piano quartet in C minor. Here is a place where it's almost an autobiographical piece. So we can continue that search into Brahms's life with this piece of music. And in this piece of music, it really exudes so much the sort of torture that he had of his love of Clara, something that we see over and over again with Brahms. The piano quartet, we were just talking about this earlier, it took him over 20 years to write it, and he had started writing it when he was living with the Schumanns, and so that it has this element of that kind of pain of that time. And when he turned it into his publisher, he actually had a writing, something on it that said, if you need an illustration for this piece, you can have a man's face on the title page with a gun to his head, and you can use my photograph for that purpose. And then he said another thing that it seems cryptic to us. You can have him wearing a blue coat and yellow shoes, or maybe it was yellow coat and blue shoes. I can't remember which is which. But what that signifies is that it is a main character. It is young Werther from Goethe's classics, the Werther. And Werther was this character. It's so interesting because they always speak they sort of speak in these sort of interesting puzzles in a way. But Werther was this character who was deeply in love with this woman. And when this woman got married to someone else, he ended up killing himself.
Wow.
So that basically Brahms is making his correlation to the same feeling of he loves this woman, he loved this woman, she was with someone else, and therefore he felt maybe even that he was dead inside, that it was all over for him. So use my picture, but this is the image that I want you to exude. And that's where this kind of piece kind of takes us through this epic journey of this feeling of love, of loss, of dealing with that loss. And I just think that that's the one thing that music does so well, is where you might not be able to find the words to express the real feelings of this. And certainly Brahms had no words to express. I mean, he was the epitome of the man who couldn't express himself emotionally except through music. And so then we get that feeling through the music, and chamber music is always the best way to be able to exude some of these things. And so so that's what we're exploring in that way.
Was this piece written, or not written because it was written over those 20-year period, but was it performed or completed after he left Clara?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely would have been performed after their relationship. I mean, they stayed in contact for the rest of their lives together, but they weren't as closely involved.
Wow, so it's kind of really after the triangle has definitely dissolved.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
that's, so it's really interesting for me, like kind of thinking about the whole season so far. Like the season so far is kind of its own whole soap opera so far, which is very kind of interesting.
Well, and you ask if I do it on purpose, and there are definitely like signposts along the way that it's on purpose. And for me, as I am putting it together,
because if it is, it's brilliant. So say that you do it on purpose.
Well, I do it on purpose, but then I always find extra things as I'm putting the concerts together, as I'm learning the music, that they must have been subliminal in a way, but I didn't realize they were connections at the time. And one of the most amazing connections, I think it's an amazing connection, is that also on the program is a piece by Aaron Jay Kernis, who is one of my favorite American living composers, just a brilliant composer. And the reason why I put his music on, the reason why I love him, is that I feel like he has such an individual voice. I feel like when I hear his music, I know it's Aaron Jay Kernis because he uses harmonies, rhythms, and textures in a way that is just wholly unto him. That's the reason why I like Johannes Brahms, because I always know when it's Brahms, like it has a certain richness, it has a voice. And to me, I know that a modern composer is great if I can detect that they have an original voice. And I think that's one of the most important things. And that was the reason why I put these pieces together. But as I'm learning them and relearning them, what I'm noticing, which is really interesting, is that the Brahms begins very austerely with the piano having an open C octaves. It's in C minor, but the piece ends on a C major chord. So going from C minor to C major. The Aaron Jay Kernis actually does virtually the same thing. It begins with the piano by itself. It's the same instrumentation, piano quartet for both pieces. The piano begins in the upper registers with a C and an E flat, which is a C minor chord, basically. So it begins in C minor. In the end, after we go through so much, it ends with the most beautiful, sublime, serene C major chord. And then this is all really important because our very first concert of the season was Beethoven's An die ferne Geliebte. And Beethoven was the first composer who went from C minor to C major. So, and C minor was so important to Beethoven as a key, and it really signified this sort of, again, I use the word torture a lot, but like the torture of the soul, and then the ultimate reconciliation of that by resolving to something that is so pleasant and easy as C major. So we have the same thing happening with Brahms, and then 100 years later with Aaron Jay Kernis. And that wasn't intentional, and I'm like, that's cool.
But I'm brilliant for doing that, right? Well, and speaking of Aaron Jay Kernis, like I really know nothing about Aaron Jay Kernis, but I think it's awesome to have this modern day composer, a living composer. And when I looked up some stuff about him, he's accomplished quite a great deal in his short career.
Right, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He won the Rome Prize. He's won all the major prizes that you can win as a composer, BMI and ASCAP. He's had major commissions with the New York Phil, the Baltimore Orchestra. I mean, just everywhere. And I understand that you haven't heard of him. I imagine most of you haven't heard of Aaron Jay Kernis before, and yet he's probably like the top 5, great composers of our time. Wow. And it's just, it's the way our culture is right now with new music, and that comes from a feeling I think oftentimes people are a little bit scared of new music, and certainly in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s, there was this real movement in classical contemporary music towards inaccessibility and towards very academic music that was sort of meant to live in academia, and that didn't, I want to say, I'm being very opinionated here, but didn't want to really appeal to audiences, composers who didn't feel that their music needed to or had to appeal to audiences. And really there's been a shift in that, that whole idea now, because as composers take the risk of getting outside of the academy and living on commissions, being able to live on composing basically, they're finding a voice for themselves that has a mission in really connecting with people. And that doesn't mean that the music is all completely happy, happy C major accessible music in that way. But it explores the kind of human condition, explores the emotionality of music, and takes us through that journey, much the same way Johannes Brahms would have taken us through that journey as well. So now is a time to start exploring new music again without fear.
Right, because it seems like what I read with a lot of his music, I mean, where like Brahms seems to be talking a lot about the war within his heart, the war within his soul, the war within his mind. Kernis seems a lot to be commenting a lot on the war on the ground.
Yeah.
A lot of his music, maybe comments, I think there was one piece of the war in Bosnia.
Right, there were several pieces that he wrote around the time of this piece, and this piece is called Still Movement with Him. Again, a piano quartet, so violin, cello, viola, and piano. He wrote two other pieces at the time, a piece for violin and orchestra called Aria, which is just breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, just so very, very ethereal in many ways. And then a piece for English horn, an English horn concerto. And at the time he was very impacted by war that was around him, and most in particularly the atrocities in Bosnia and Croatia. And finding a way to come to terms with, well, you don't come to terms with genocide, but to kind of make a commentary on genocide, make a commentary on war, make a commentary on atrocities that human beings engage in through music. And so with this piece of music, again called Still Movement with Him, he puts together, and that's Hymn, he puts together basically a commentary on those ideas. And we start out again with this C minor bell-like reiteration, and just these sort of bell sounds in the piano that begin, and some of them are very consonant, and then some of them will be a little bit dissonant, so almost like you're hearing bells in the distance from different churches or synagogues or whatever that might be, and sometimes they're in conflict with one another. And then this gorgeous, amazing cello line comes in while the piano is still doing these chimes. The cello comes in, has this very, very long melody, seems like it's very loosely based. And Kernis brought to that the idea actually from a Jewish background. So this is almost a prayer for the dead, a Kaddish, what is called a Kaddish. And in that tradition, there are these long lines that sort of go moving in and out of one another. The cello starts, and then we have a gorgeous violin sort of coming in, really, really high, ethereal angel-like, that kind of comments on this. So then we have this introduction really to this piece that has these more mournful qualities to it. And then in the middle of it, we do get into the thick of it. There's some really real commentary on the horrors, I think, of war. And yes, this composer does explore that through the use of dissonance and full, rich harmonies that are that resolve in some ways. And then the last part, which is the hymn, I mean, it's just one of the most beautiful moments in music of all time, when we sort of open up to these gorgeous chords that are soft but full and rich, and get us to that place of understanding and acceptance. You don't have to like something, but we have to come to a place of resolution in our hearts, otherwise it eats us up over and over again. And I think that this piece just does an incredible way of doing that. I first played this piece actually when I was at University of Texas. I was in the New Music Ensemble there, and we were able to work together with the composer at that time, and I played this piece, and I was so taken by it, and I just couldn't wait to program it with ACMC. And it's taken me this long, but I really think that this is the program to do it.
I feel like two pieces like these, two pieces that obviously have deep emotional roots, require an ensemble of particular particular skill, and not just skill because technique is one thing, but also just a internal relationship that is very special. So the performers playing on this particular program, Charles Weatherby, Corinne Fujiwara, and Clancy Newman, who are all musicians who played ACMC concerts before. How did you particularly select these very talented people to come together to play this program?
Well, it's interesting because I play with these people at ACMC, but we also play together in Colorado, usually in the month of August. And not this past August, but the August before that, I was playing some concerts with Clancy. And we were actually driving around in a car, and we were talking about modern music and composers of our day. And we were talking about it because we were playing a piece by Clancy, because Clancy is also a composer, and he writes really, really cool pieces of music. And we were talking about various ones, and he was telling me which composers he really hated, which I won't mention, like I won't embarrass him in that way. But when I said, you know which composer I just love so much of our time, that I think has so much integrity, and just the music is so fantastic. And we just about said it at the same time, Aaron Jay Kernis. And that to me was like this connection of oh, you love him too, this is so great. And we talked about this piece of music, Still Movement, with him, that he had just played. I think he was at, I want to say he was at Marlborough or maybe Ravinia, and he was playing this piece. It's a super, super hard piece, and for one thing, it just requires the utmost virtuosity from all four players. So putting together a special group is really important. So the fact that he had played it before, and he said, I love that piece, I would love to play it again. I'm like, let's play it again in Austin. And I said, let's not do it next year because I'm having a baby next year, but why don't we do it the year after? And so now we're here, and I knew that wherever this landed, that this was one of the very specific things that I wanted him to play on, because he had experience with it and loved it so much. And putting him together with Chaz Weatherby and Corinne Fujiwara, we've played together so many times.
And they're so great. The two of them have their own kind of synergy and are amazing to watch. And then Clancy is fantastic. And they said the technique part of it, I mean, like you said, you have to have a certain amount of virtuosity. But then when you can lay that aside and really
for sure
unleash yourself into the emotional part of it, because it sounds like you just have to lay yourself bare for those pieces. Yeah,
and for a piece of music like this, you don't want to have to worry about those technical things. So you have to have, I mean, and that's a given. You expect us to have players who can just do anything. But this is a very special work in that way. You're right. You want to be able to transcend any of those difficulties to be able to really get to the core of the meaning,
to the sublime
of these. Exactly.
Of this.
And actually, the three of them played the Brahms C minor quartet just this past summer in Colorado. I didn't go this year again because I just had a baby. So there's all those connections in that way. We've played the Brahms C minor together in Colorado years ago too. So it's just so great to come back to this repertoire and to really explore it. And again, you're right to be able to get to a point where you can give all of yourself, so that the music in a way is it's in front of you, but it's not sort of like this. You're able to get outside of that and be able to really communicate the emotionality of it and the story behind it, and give all of that to the audience, because that's really the rewarding part for the audience, is to hear the music, but then to be a part of that emotional journey.
I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most, and we hope you guys will look forward to it and join us for the Sublime Movement. It's going to be January 17th and 18th, and we'll see you at the concert.
See you later. Thanks for joining us. Bye.